Well, hello. I'm the lone journalist for KRAZ TV. Doc Martin here with another book review. You know, the last one that we did for the Zero Channel is called Microplastics by Matt Simon. And Matt Simon interviewed these people here. They started 5 gyres. A gyre is a big place in the ocean where the currents, if you let it drift, if you drift all around, they all eventually come into 5 or 6 different large areas in the ocean. And so it's about plastic, and that's where the plastic goes, is along these corridors until it all disintegrates. So it's called Junk Raft, and it's Marcus Eriksen. That's a picture of them on the raft. He's got a friend named Joel too. Marcus Eriksen is the co-founder and director of research for the 5 Gyres Institute. With first-hand experience from more than 20 ocean crossing expeditions, and he has written and published research on the impact of plastic pollution in the world's oceans. He is the author of My River Home, A Journey from the Gulf War to the Gulf of Mexico. So he is a Gulf War veteran, and he actually did go back over there and reconcile and help those people out over there, and did plastic pollution in the Red Sea also, and Gulf and stuff. News media brought the great Pacific garbage patch, the famous swirling gyre of plastic pollution in the ocean, into the public consciousness. But when Marcus Eriksen co-founded the 5 Gyres Institute with his wife, Anna Cummings, and set out to study the world's oceans with hundreds of volunteers, they discovered a plastic smog of microscopic debris that permeates our oceans globally, defying simple cleanup efforts. What's more, these microplastics and their toxic chemistry have seeped into the food chain, threatening marine life and humans alike. From being a gloomy treatise on an environmental catastrophe, though, Junk Raft tells the exciting story of Eriksen and his team's fight to solve the problem of plastic pollution. A scientist, activist, and invertebrate adventurer, Eriksen is drawn to the sea by a desire to right an environmental injustice. Against long odds and common sense, he and his co-navigator, Joel Pascal, constructed a junk raft made of plastic trash and set themselves adrift from LA and Los Angeles to Hawaii. With no money or support vessel, confronting cyclones, food shortages, and a fast-decaying raft. As Eriksen recounts his struggles to keep afloat, he immerses readers in the history of the plastic pollution crisis and the movement that has risen to combat it. The proliferation of cheap plastic products during the 20th century has left the world awash in trash. Meanwhile, the plastic industry, with its lobbying muscle, fights tooth and nail against any changes that would affect its initiative status quo, instead defending poorly designed products and deflecting responsibility for the harm they cause. But as Eriksen shows, the tide is turning in the battle to save the world's oceans. He recounts the successful efforts that he and many other activists are waging to fight the corporate influence and demand that plastic producers be held accountable. Junk Raft provides a concrete, actionable solutions and an empowering message. It's within our power to change the throwaway culture for the sake of our planet. Well, boy, isn't that the truth. It's an amazing, amazing story. He has a PhD in science education, but he got started in in the fight long before he got on the oceans as a junk rafter, or making the junk rafter. This was to make a point after, but he'd been challenged because his degree wasn't enough, or you're not scientific enough. And then, of course, they have found out the little trick. It's called junk science. Now, junk science is that it's a true scientist, but they're maintaining a position that there's bad science and then there's junk science. But junk science is when you can take it and pretend to have a great argument by using certain data and facts and figures your way. So we're not saying it's not science, but you know, it's like debate class. You pick this side to be on and that side, even though you're against it, you have to argue for it. You know? It's the same way. But anyway, it's a very compelling story, and it's really starts with people fighting the plastics. And some of the biggest things that they found was microbeads. And finally they have fought it to get rid of those stupid things you didn't need anyways. And it's all just, and single-use plastic bags, they drive me up the wall anyways. But he has friends that has a place like the big recyclable bags that are, you know, Sprouts has them now. If you want one, you got to pay 10 cents. But they can be used hundreds of times over, and they really are thick and all of that. So, but even the people, this guy's using plastics, but he's against the single use. So the industries are fighting him, even though he's making Chico bags. It just has no rhyme or reason, but. And then the big names have changed too, you know, they were other names, and then they became the American Plastic Council, and American this and that, and chemical societies and stuff. And they spent a lot of money in Washington, and it just takes people fighting and fighting and fighting to do something. Well, anyways, they had been out trawling, and you trawl with a great big like sea anchor with a mesh in it, and then they go for so many kilometers on the ocean, and then they pull it out, and then they do counts of sizes of plastic. It goes from nano to micro to meso to macro, you know. So it goes up to large pieces. And they found out that a lot of the durable plastics that are in the ocean come from fishing, like large floats and nets. Nets are the worst. But shipping containers, you know, they lost, there was one, I think they dropped 20,000 containers overboard. It just fell, or they foundered or something, and some of them had like tennis shoes and rubber ducks. There's famous stories about scientists testing checking currents, because all along Alaska they found these rubber ducks. And they actually, in here, he solved the mystery of why they keep finding some people's foot, you know, they're an actual human foot inside of a tennis shoe or a track shoe or something. And what it is that some of the crew members were killed when some of these container ships and all that broke open and all of that. And so when you had a load of tennis shoes come out, well, somebody's foot was in there, because that was probably a crew member. Not all, I'm sure, but a great many of them, because they have found a lot of these single feet in shoes on the shores of Oregon and all of that. So part of the morbid story. But anyways, with the junk raft, he finally said, no, let's make a point. And so he got an old airplane, a Cessna 310. Why, I don't know. It was something they could live in, I guess. And they put it on a pontoon rafts of plastics. And then they took old nets and hoisted them together. They found out that you have to really glue the lids on caps, because they will come loose and then your vessel will sink. So anyway, they finally got it all ready to go, and they all got towed out to sea to 60 miles to Bishop Island, and they started foundering right then. It's because they didn't screw those lids on and all that. So they had to make do and refurbish the raft and make it work, so that then they did start out on their journey. They thought it wouldn't take as long as it did, and then they started going south. They went to Acapulco and all, and then they tried to rig a second raft and turn a little bit, so they got going towards Hawaii. And then they got running low on food, so they started catching food, and they found out that a lot of fish followed the raft because it acted as a haven of safety for them. So they got going, and then they have a woman friend. Her name was Roz, and she was a rower. She had rowed across the Atlantic, and well, they had satellite phones and stuff like that. Even the Coast Guard came down and said, "What the hell are you doing out here?" And they said, "Okay, you're taking your life in your hand," but they went on. But anyways, Roz was out there, and she phoned in that she'd lost her water somehow, or she was running out of water. Now this raft was hundreds of miles away from her, and they're just drifting, right? So they talked to her, and they figured out their vector, and they floated together. Well, she aimed toward them because she said, "I never turned the bow's always heading towards the west, going to Hawaii, but she had to turn around a little bit to intercept these guys." And they were running out of food, and she had food, and they gave her water and a water maker, and they met in the middle of the Pacific. So it's a heart-rendering story. It's just, it's funny, but it was dangerous. They're in apprehension all the time whether the raft was going to make it or not, and they were didn't take as many books with them, so they read Don Quixote several times, and they learned a lot. And then, of course, after the trip was over, then I think they instituted 5 gyres after that. But anyways, after this exhibitionist journey, then they actually took vessels and convinced other people, and so then they went 10, 15 more times into the Indian gyre. There's gyres south of the equator and gyres north of the equator, and they collected in all of them. But they did find out that there's trillions of micro particles, but the microparticles are not floating and are capturable because zooplankton, protozoans, and this kind of stuff, worms and all this other stuff, gathers on it, and once it gets weight, because it like has a neutral buoyancy, it's just below the surface of the waves, and then heavier plastic will drop, but eventually all of this drops down, and it forms a layer in the bottom of the sea. So from satellite, then they're starting to see, when they're following these gyres, it looks like a big black plume under the water, and this is what they called the plastic smog. That eventually all plastics, and the sea, you wouldn't think that it would grind plastic down to what it does, but it's pretty fast, and it's always being nibbled off by animals. And it got so bad, eventually he said he went to Kuwait or Dubai or Oman or one of those guys, and he was helping one of the presidents of the country because he had a camel endeavor. Then he found, it's called a gastrolith, where the poor camel ate 45 pounds of plastic, and I'm sure it killed it. And, so he'd carry this monster turd or crap around and show these people at these conferences and places, look here what it's killing them. When you hold up 45-pound plug of plastic to people finally get a clue, But and they also, when they caught fish in the sea, they would open them up and find the microplastics and stuff. And the albatross, they would always find the stuff. And it was just a disheartening story. And it's not going to get better. Well, eventually it will, we hope. You got to just stop demanding use of plastic. Use recycled bags. Recycling, though, they said, is just part of the solution. Most of it is burnt. Waste is burnt. Hawaii has a large burning incinerator, so even school children are getting mad. They don't want to use styrofoam anymore, and so they're using compostable food trays and stuff like that. And, you know, maybe growing hemp will help or something. So I just keep ranting and raving. It's over 15 minutes. I rarely take this long, and look how little the book is. But it was such a great story. There were things in there that he said every day that made you laugh, but it's a very serious issue, folks. And think about what you do, and get involved if you can, and say a word to somebody, and stick to your values. So that's my rant. Thanks for watching. We got this book at the Tucson Pima County Public Library, and it comes from Beacon Press in Boston. Thanks for watching. This is Junk Raft by Marcus Eriksen and et al. Thank you very much for watching KRAZ TV.